doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.
If I can now call on the Honourable Minister from Gambia for her remarks, please.
Good afternoon and warm greetings from the people of the smiling coast of Africa, that's the Gambia. We're happy to join this wonderful panel that looks into innovative ideas to mitigate climate change impacts on Africa. The NDC, the popular NDC, the most popular word in the climate arena, has been the praise of everyone for so many times. And now they're saying that they need more ambitious NDC. What do we mean by more ambitious NDCs when we are already battling in the implementation of our ambitious NDC? The Gambia, I keep saying this and I will continue saying it because it's a model and a medal that needs to be given to the Gambia. We have presented a very robust, ambitious NDC that resonates with the 1.5 climate reduction targets, but yet still implementation is our challenge. It has been costed to $4 billion by nature of the small environment that we have. As mentioned by the previous panel, the size of the country usually also serves as both an advantage and a disadvantage to private sector players. And here we are faced with the Gambia. But again, one thing that we do is we have a very strategic locations in terms of our market viability and potentials. Despite the small size in both population and land, the potential is there to connect to other regions. I will just give you a hint of why the Gambia is so attractive in investment. Life in the Gambia is cheaper, it's the cheapest in the sub-region. Despite the fact that we are all struggling with the effect of COVID, and other instabilities, but it's still the cheapest in the sub-region, indicating that investment in the region or in the Gambia is cheaper. And even access to other, it's just the crossing point to get to other countries. That's how the Gambia is. For the NDC, we've just launched the implementation plan of our NDC 2, which has been costed, but again, from the presentation that I've just witnessed, indicates to us that we have some gaps. In as much as you have a plan, the plan needs to communicate as to how to access the finance. The plan needs to be detailed to touch base with the investors, knowing fully well that at the climate change, we have commitments to fulfilling pledges. What do we want to do now? To induce private sector players in mitigating adaptation and other climate challenges. That's the hard fact. And for the Gambia with our NDC, we have 5 critical areas. One is agriculture. Agriculture is the backbone of our economy. More than 70% of the population are employed by this sector, and it contributes more than 20% to our GDP. This is how important the agriculture is. But again, it has been affected by the impact of climate change. Saltwater intrusion is affecting rice productions to the extent that before, I was informed that our grandparents used to use rice to paint their houses when the season ends because they don't want to eat the old rice. So they will pound it to powders and use it as paint. But today we are importing rice. We are not only importing rice, even we are struggling to get that to meet the demand. So that tells you that the potential is there to produce. But then we are not because of climate change impacts and other socio-economic challenges that we are facing. So there is a huge potential for private investment in this sector. But not only that, to also blend this with a climate-smart agriculture, which has been also motivated by other impacts in the sub-region. We have energy deficiency in the country and the sub-region. But good to tell you that because of our nature, we have the OMVG, that's the River Gambia river basin. We have 4 countries that are into this. Guinea, Senegal, the 2 Guineas, Bissau and Conakry, and Senegal and the Gambia. We have built an infrastructure that can connect and we can supply from each of these sub-regions energy. So if you are in the Gambia, and then we having the sun that has never given us invoice. Why can't we leverage on this? When we are going into fossil fuel, that is damaging our environment and our health. But then the sun is there, and the Gambia sun has been remarkably praised to be one of the most quality in terms of energy supply. And then we have the potential to connect to other regions, to the sub-regions, as I mentioned here. But we are under access to fundings, the private sector players. We have in the transport sector, when we are talking about the efficient infrastructure. And this is the climate infrastructure, and it's also another huge investment. But one thing I keep saying is, the investors have a very sharp eye. As a politician, I will struggle for the rest of my life without seeing potential, as any other person. But the investor have a very sharp eye. When they look at anything or scrutinize, they see potential that are endless. So sometimes, as a country, or maybe as a politician, or maybe as an environmentalist, we will not be able to see these critical pointers. So collaborating with the investors should be able to open these pointers. There was this mention on the biodiversity and restorations, which the Gambia is having the gap as well. It's our key priority in the NDC, but the gap is there. And we need the private sector collaborations. That's why with the Department of Parks and Wildlife, we are working on a PPP document, how to open up to entice the private sector to play into this market. Government is challenging to manage the infrastructure for the simple reason that the investors here will tell me why. It's difficult for government to manage their assets, their own assets. So we're having this deterioration of our assets. That is the key backbone of our tourism sector, which Gambia has been known. That's why we call it Smiling Coast of Africa. But because of your losing, due to the impact of climate change, this thing is taking us back. So we need to open up a private sector player to come and invest in this sector, kill two birds with one stone, leverage on the potential to support the SDG, but also mitigate the climate impacts. And again, of course, our tourism sector, which has been very vibrant in the old days, and this needs to come back again. Finally, I understand and I believe that investing in especially small countries like the Gambia would require a de-risking mechanism. That's the fact. Investors don't have money just to give grants. That's why we are calling for the PPP. You put in, I put in, then we balance, then we reduce your risk. So if investors are given the de-risking mechanism to be able to balance the challenges of failure, sometimes it's not failing because of the money. The reputation has been mentioned here. Sometimes just because you are an investor, your project or your investment failing is a bad reputation for you, not the money. So it is important that to have that mechanism to bridge the gap of failure, because the fear of failure is driving most people from investing in markets, especially small economies like the Gambia. So we call in for this so that we'll be able to entice and get all these beautiful philanthropists to invest in the Gambia. Match it. Let's match it. Those that are there to support climate mitigation impacts, well, philanthropists, they just want the goodwill. They just want Mother Earth to breathe very excellently. That's their intention. They don't need money. Those that want to put something aside for the future, that's the financial aspect. And those that want to serve political gains, that's the public. Needs to come together to match interests and invest in matters of climate change. It's affecting all of us together, and we don't have any time to waste. So I will save your time for that matter. Thank you so much.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.